In the heart of medieval Europe, amidst the clang of swords and the whispers of royal courts, rose a queen whose true weapon was peace and whose throne was humility. This is the story of Isabel of Portugal, not merely a ruler adorned in silk and gold, but a saint cloaked in charity and crowned with prayer. Born into nobility, married into power, and tested by conflict, Isabel lived not for ambition, but for love, the divine kind that transforms kingdoms. From secret acts of mercy to the miracle of the roses, her life became a testament to God's peace amid human storms. Join us now as we uncover the extraordinary journey of a woman who became a saint not through conquest, but through compassion. Chapter 1. Born of royal blood, chosen by heaven. In the royal courts of medieval Aragon, where politics moved like shadowy tides and crowns were born of ambition, a light quietly emerged. Her name was Isabel, daughter of King Peter III and Queen Constance of Sicily. From her birth, she seemed different. Gentle in voice, firm in prayer, her gaze held a wisdom far beyond her years. While other noble children played with jewels and silks, Isabel found her joy in prayer and silence. She fasted secretly, gave her meals to the poor, and knelt before the crucifix long after the court had gone to sleep. Monks whispered that she was marked by heaven. After all, she shared her name with her great-aunt, Saint Elizabeth of Hungary. But unlike other holy souls destined for convent walls, Isabel's calling would unfold in the chaos of royal life. At just 12 years old, she was married to King Denis of Portugal, a ruler known for his wisdom, but also for his political focus and strict control. The court into which Isabel entered was a world of iron and parchment, laws, alliances, and duties. Yet from her first steps through the palace gates, she carried with her a fragrance of peace. She never demanded respect, but inspired it. Her words were few, her actions gentle, and yet her presence calmed the storms of pride and jealousy that brewed within royal walls. Though Denis was a strong king, he did not fully understand his young wife. He ruled with strategy, she ruled with grace. He built roads and laws, she built bridges between hearts. And in the shadows of this powerful marriage, Isabel began a quiet revolution of mercy. She gave to the poor in secret, founded hospitals, and clothed the orphaned. No soul was beneath her notice. When others turned their faces from the sick or beggars, Isabel leaned closer. Her charity was not a public performance. It was a covenant between her heart and God. But she was not without trials. King Denis was not always faithful. The queen bore his betrayals with silence, pouring her grief into prayer. She did not confront with fury, but with fasting. Not out of weakness, but of strength, the kind forged in deep communion with God. Their children became her next mission. She bore, too, Constanza and the heir, Alfonso. From their earliest days, she guided them with tenderness and truth. Where others taught them royal strategy, Isabel taught them divine wisdom. She showed them that power without mercy is a kingdom built on sand. Yet peace would not come easily. As Alfonso grew, so did tension between father and son. Political disagreements became dangerous. Swords were sharpened, alliances drawn. Isabel found herself between two kings, one who had ruled for decades and one who hungered for the throne. But her spirit did not waver. She fasted again, prayed harder, and prepared to do what only a mother, queen, and saint could do: stand between anger and ruin and be the living peace of God. In her youth, people had called her pious. In her marriage, they called her patient. But now, all began to see something more. Isabel was not just a queen. She was being shaped, day by day, sacrifice by sacrifice, into a saint. Chapter 2. The Peacemaker of Iberia. Portugal, in Isabel's time, was a land of rising ambition. Under King Denis, cities expanded, agriculture flourished, and laws were crafted with precision. But beneath the polished surface, tensions brewed. Nobles fought for influence. Territories sparked rivalries. In the heart of the palace, the greatest conflict of all was taking shape between the king and his son. Prince Afonso, bold and impassioned, disagreed with his father's rule. He believed in strength, in a vision for Portugal that challenged the cautious order Dennis had built. Heated debates turned into cold silences. Whispers of rebellion stirred, and soon it became more than a family feud. It threatened to ignite civil war. Isabel, mother to the prince, queen to the king, stood at the center of a storm. But she did not flinch. While men drew battle lines and polished armor, Isabel entered a different battlefield, the one of the soul. She fasted. She prayed. She visited monasteries seeking divine counsel. She moved between the two men, not with commands, but with tears. She refused to choose sides, not out of indecision, but because her loyalty was not to pride or power. It was to peace. Then came the day when armies gathered. Father and son stood ready to face each other across open fields. The clash of blood against blood loomed over Portugal like a storm cloud. And Isabel did the unthinkable. She rode out, alone between the two forces. No guard, no sword. Just her, cloaked in royal blue, carrying nothing but the weight of her love and the authority of her faith. Witnesses say the wind stilled when she spoke. She reminded them both of what they risked: the soul of a nation, the honor of their family, the mercy of God. She knelt on the earth between them, her voice breaking with emotion, pleading not as queen, but as mother. And a miracle happened. Prince Afonso lowered his sword. King Dennis disbanded the army. The war was over before it began. Portugal was spared. From that day forward, she was no longer just a pious woman or patient wife. She was the peacemaker of Iberia, a queen who stopped a war with nothing but love. But Isabel didn't stop with her own family. She intervened in conflicts across the peninsula, from noble feuds to city disputes. Kings and bishops wrote to her for advice. Her reputation grew, not for brilliance in debate, but for the unwavering integrity of her soul. She was never loud, but always heard. Never forceful, but deeply persuasive. And while kingdoms shifted and kings aged, Isabel kept planting seeds of charity, of humility, of reconciliation. She knew that peace was not a single act, but a lifelong mission. For Isabel, peacemaking was not weakness. It was divine courage. And God was not finished with her yet. Chapter 3. Miracles in the Shadows. She never sought glory. Isabel, Queen of Portugal, walked the palace halls like a servant in royal robes. She avoided fanfare, slipped away from court banquets, and knelt in the quietest corners of the chapel. But heaven does not hide the light of its saints for long. Miracles began to follow her, not in bursts of spectacle, but in quiet, undeniable wonder. The most famous began with bread. One winter morning, Isabel left the palace gates with her cloak full of loaves. As always, she moved in secret, distributing food to the poor. But that day, the king intercepted her. He had grown tired of her constant generosity. The treasury was strained, and whispers in court mocked her charity as childish. "What do you carry in your cloak?" he asked sternly. She paused. Her heart prayed in silence. Then she opened it, and instead of bread, there were roses. In the dead of winter, brilliant, fragrant roses tumbled from her arms. The king stood in stunned silence, and though he said nothing more, he never questioned her acts of mercy again. Another time, a group of pilgrims arrived at the palace gates, ragged and starving. Isabel herself brought them food, washed their feet, and tended their wounds. Days later, one of her attendants found her weeping in the chapel. She had recognized one of the men, not as a mere pilgrim, but as Christ himself in disguise. These miracles were not for fame. She never spoke of them. Others did. Stories spread of healing through her prayers, of prisoners released after her intercession, of storms calmed when she knelt. But for Isabel, miracles were not performances. They were simply the overflow of a soul in perfect union with God. She had no ambition but to serve. Her hands became sacred instruments, feeding the hungry, comforting the sick, building bridges between enemies. And yet, she always called herself unworthy. She never wore a crown in private. She wore ashes. What others saw as wonder, she saw as responsibility. She once said, "To serve is to rule, to love is to reign." And she lived it. Miracles did not lift her from suffering. They deepened her compassion. For every rose that bloomed, there was still hunger. For every healing, another sorrow. But she embraced them all, not as burdens, but as gifts she could offer back to the cross. And in the quiet corners of the palace, behind the marble and the thrones, a saint was being formed. Chapter 4. Widow and Pilgrim of Peace. The crown had grown heavy, and the years had passed like river water, sometimes calm, sometimes storming. When King Denis fell ill, Isabel stayed at his side. She held his hand through his final days, whispering prayers into the veil between life and death. He died in peace, and with his passing, Isabel's earthly role as queen ended. But her mission had only just begun. She could have retired to a life of comfort, to prayer behind convent walls. But Isabel chose the road. She sold her jewels. She gave away her riches. And she walked, barefoot, humble, toward a new calling. She became a pilgrim of peace. At the heart of Europe, war once again gathered like thunder. Castile and Aragon prepared for battle. Among the warriors stood her son, now King Afonso IV of Portugal. Though he wore the crown she once helped save, his heart was hardened by politics and pride. Isabel, now old and fragile, took up her cross, this time not metaphorically. She traveled north, through the dust and heat, toward the battlefield. Pilgrims and soldiers alike watched in awe as she passed. This former queen, dressed in a simple habit, riding not in a carriage, but on a donkey. When she arrived, swords were drawn. Her son stood unbending. But once more, Isabel stepped into the fire. She pleaded. She prayed aloud under the open sky. She spoke of mercy, of wasted blood, of the God of peace who still watched from heaven. And again, the miracle happened. The two kings agreed to truce. The armies disbanded. War was held back, if only for a moment, by the faith of one woman. She collapsed shortly after, her body broken by the journey. She was taken to a nearby convent, where her final days were marked not by pain, but by peace. Surrounded by nuns and villagers, she received the Eucharist with trembling hands. Her final words were a whisper, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace." Chapter 5. The Incorrupt Queen. Isabel's body was laid to rest in the monastery of Santa Clara in Coimbra, a house she had founded with her own hands, her own prayers, her own sacrifice. The nuns wept not only for a queen, but for a mother, gentle, generous, and full of divine fire. And there, among the candles and stone walls, her story might have ended. But heaven was not finished. Years passed. Wars changed maps. Kings were crowned and buried. Yet the people kept coming to her tomb. They came not for spectacle, but for healing, for hope, for answers. And one by one, the miracles returned. The sick were cured. The blind saw. The afflicted left walking, singing, rejoicing. Crutches were left behind at her grave like forgotten burdens. The church sent investigators, doctors, priests, and when the tomb was opened, the people gasped. Her body, though untouched by embalming, had not decayed. Her skin was soft, her face peaceful. A fragrance of roses filled the chamber. She had become one of the incorruptibles, that rare sign of divine favor that defies natural law. A body preserved not by science, but by sanctity. Word spread across Europe. And finally, in the year 1625, 3 centuries after her death, the church proclaimed her a saint. Saint Isabel of Portugal, a woman of peace, mercy, and miracles. But for those who had known her, the greatest wonder was never her incorrupt body. It was her incorrupt soul. Her legacy lived on in orphanages, hospitals, bridges, convents, structures she had built not of stone alone, but of love. In every corner of Portugal, where the hungry were fed, where the lost were welcomed, where forgiveness triumphed over vengeance, her spirit walked still. She had not ruled with iron or gold. She had ruled with humility. She had not won battles with armies. She had won hearts with prayer. And in the heart of Portugal, from generation to generation, a quiet voice remains, a whisper on the wind, reminding those who listen. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Thank you for joining us on this sacred journey through the life of Saint Isabel of Portugal. If her story touched your heart, we invite you to like this video, share with others, and subscribe to our channel for more epic and inspiring tales of saints and heroes of the faith. May her legacy of peace, mercy, and divine love continue to shine in your life. Until next time, walk in grace and never stop seeking the light.